If you're doing ERP and it suddenly feels like your anxiety has skyrocketed, the obsessional thoughts are louder, the urges to do the compulsions are much stronger, then you're probably thinking, I can't do this. So if ERP is making you feel worse, then this is the video for you. I'm Dr. Liz White, a consultant clinical psychologist with over 20 years experience. This channel is about evidence-based help for anxiety, overthinking, and OCD. By the end of this video, you'll be a lot clearer on what most people expect ERP to feel like, what's actually happening when you do an exposure, how this all looks across different OCD themes, and why ERP can feel worse again and again and again as you progress. And stick around till the end because I'm going to be giving you my tips on how to navigate ERP. First up though, let's talk about what most people expect ERP to feel like. Most people start ERP thinking that it will be hard but manageable. They imagine doing the exposure, the anxiety or the uncertainty spiking, and then that settling down. Maybe not feeling instantly calm, but reassured that they're kind of on the right track. And sometimes it does look like that, but very often it doesn't. A lot of the time you do the exposure, you resist the compulsion successfully, and instead of relief, your brain throws everything at you. Anxiety intensifies, urges increase, doubt gets louder. Sometimes shame or self-criticism joins in as well. And that's usually the point that people conclude, ERP is backfiring, it's not for me. But, and the next thing I'm going to say is really important. In reality, that spike is often the first sign that something important is shifting. Now, let's look at what is actually happening when you're doing an exposure. ERP doesn't aim to reduce anxiety immediately. Its primary function is to remove the safety behaviours that you have relied on for so long, often years. Things like checking, washing, reassurance seeking, avoidance, all bring short-term relief. Over time, that relief teaches your brain a clear association. This behavior prevents danger or harm. Now, the problem is that relief does not last. So the behavior or the compulsion or the avoidance has to be repeated, and that association gets stronger over time. When those behaviors are removed, your brain responds by increasing threat signals. Anxiety rises and that fight or flight alarm system activates, not because there is real danger, but because a familiar coping strategy is no longer available. What changes things is repetition over time. When you stay with an exposure without doing the compulsion, and you do that again and again and again, your brain learns something new. That anxiety or uncertainty or doubt can rise and fall on its own, and that the feared outcome doesn't need to be prevented for you to cope or live your life. Now, this learning does not usually happen in a single exposure. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen that across my 20 years in mental health. It happens across repeated exposures. Your nervous system becomes less reactive, and that alarm system switches on less intensively and for shorter periods of time. That process is what people often call anxiety settling or habituating. But it's really about learning a different relationship with fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This is why ERP can feel like it's making things worse, particularly early on in the process, and why that impression can be so convincing, even though underneath a different pattern is starting to form. Let me show you how this looks across different OCD themes. Let's take checking OCD first. You leave the house without checking anything, and your brain immediately tells you you're irresponsible, careless, or reckless, or all three. That anxiety spike isn't evidence of danger or you being a bad person. It's the discomfort of leaving something unresolved, of not knowing for sure that everything is locked and shut. With contamination OCD, you touch the trigger and you don't wash. Your body may react with intense disgust and urgency, like something is fundamentally wrong and you need to solve it right now. That reaction doesn't mean that you or anyone else is unsafe. It means that you have learned that washing excessively equals relief and reduction of risk. With taboo intrusive thoughts, ERP often means allowing those really distressing thoughts without neutralizing them, analyzing them, or proving to yourself that you're not that person. When you stop doing the mental rituals, those thoughts can feel louder and more convincing. And OCD will often tell people that lack of reaction means something terrible. In reality, you've just stopped feeding that loop. In relationship OCD or ROCD, you stop checking your feelings or you stop reassurance seeking around how your partner is the right one for you. That doubt can then surge, often with a sense of urgency and utter dread. That spike doesn't reveal a truth about your relationship. It reflects the fact that you have removed those behaviors that keep you stuck in seeking certainty. I'm curious though, if you have embarked on ERP or you're trying to do ERP, what's it been like for you? Let me know in the comments. Next, let's talk about how ERP can feel worse again and again as you progress. ERP doesn't usually feel really difficult and awful once and then improve in a straight line. It can feel awful again and again as you move through treatment. Now, a really good way to think about ERP is like strength training at the gym. You don't lift the heaviest weight on day one, do you? You start where you can, and as your strength builds, you add heavier weights. And each time the weight goes up, your muscles shake a little bit more. Not because you've lost strength, but because you're asking your muscles to do something harder and more challenging. ERP works the same way. Each step up your fear ladder adds more weight. Anxiety or uncertainty or discomfort rises again. Not because you're failing, but because you're training a more demanding response. That doesn't mean that the earlier work doesn't count. And what changes over time isn't that anxiety never shows up again. What changes is how quickly it peaks, how long it hangs around, and how much power it has over what you do next. And if no one explains this, it's really understandable to be left thinking, I should be past this by now. And that's often where a lot of people will disengage in ERP. Now, when ERP feels like this, it's really hard to remember all this stuff. And that's why inside my YouTube membership, I have developed and created some listen when audios. And these are brief recordings designed to support you at specific points in the ERP journey. So go and check them out. The link is in the description. Now, in the final part of this video, I'm going to outline what helps when you're doing ERP. So here are my tips for when ERP feels really tough. First, expect anxiety to rise, especially when you level up. A new exposure is by definition a challenge. Feeling worse again doesn't erase your progress. It just means that you're doing something harder than before. And that is how you progress through ERP. But there is a caveat to that. It is possible to level up too quickly. So if you move up before the anxiety on the previous level has settled a little, not perfectly, but enough, your brain doesn't have the opportunity to learn that the earlier exposure was tolerable. And when you're moving too quickly, then the exposures can just feel really overwhelming rather than challenging. And that's when ERP begins to feel really unmanageable. Second, stop using relief as a measure of success. If you judge ERP by how calm you feel when you're doing it, it will always look like it's failing. A better question is, did I do the exposure and resist the compulsion long enough for my brain to learn something new? Third, watch out for subtle or sneaky compulsions. Mental checking, analysing, self-reassurance, which is a really sneaky one, or washing your hands in a gentler way. All of these compulsions can keep that old OCD cycle going. even when they feel harmless. Fourth, stay with the exposure long enough when it's safe to do so. So for example, in contamination OCD, that means doing exposures around everyday surfaces that feel or are perceived to be dirty, not doing it with genuinely hazardous materials. ERP targets imagined threats, not real danger. And again, staying long enough with these exposures helps your brain learn that that discomfort that you feel isn't harmful. Fifth, don't argue with the thoughts. ERP isn't about proving those doubts or intrusive thoughts wrong. It's about learning that the doubts, the commands, the obsessions, the intrusions don't require action. Lastly, be compassionate, not harsh with yourself. ERP work is demanding, and how you speak to yourself during it really matters. Self-criticism does not help you build resilience. It adds another layer of threat, which makes anxiety louder and the work of ERP a lot harder. Now, what's often more effective is to try and have a part of you that acts as a sort of compassionate coach, not someone who forces you through or shames you into not doing the compulsions, but a steady, calm, encouraging, supportive voice that says, "This is hard, keep going," and gently supports you as you move through the ERP exposures. Now, one of my favorite listen when audios inside the membership is listen when an exposure feels especially hard, because in it I talk about this idea of a compassionate coach and how you can use that to really help you and support you through exposures that feel particularly tough. So let's recap. If ERP feels like it's made everything worse, it doesn't automatically mean that something's gone badly wrong. Often it means that your threat system, your nervous system is reacting to change. And remember that ERP is like weight training, and going slow and steady with intention and planning is the best way to approach it. And the further along you go, the more exposures that you do without doing the compulsions, is you building skills to finally break free from OCD. It can be done. I've seen it so many times over the years. Now, if this has helped you, please do share this video with anyone that you think would benefit from watching it. And don't forget, if you need a little extra support, then do go and check out my Listen When audios in the membership. I would love to see you there. And I'll see you in the next video.